pulling apart this letter with a prosecutor on one side, former federal prosecutor Lee Sewell, who is also in power of attorney, and on the other side, criminal defense attorney Geoffrey Nathan, who, by the way, was once what Chandra Levy was, a Washington intern. Welcome to you both.
Thank you.
Since by now you guys have both read this letter, I'd like to walk through certain aspects of it that at least to a journalist jumped out, and I want to see if, as lawyers, some of these aspects jumped out to you as well. Let's go into a couple paragraphs in when he talks about saying after Chandra Levy's father contacted him, he goes on to say. Since that day and every day since, I have cooperated and worked with law enforcement to find Chandra. I invited the police to my apartment. I asked the FBI to help. Lisa, let me start with you. I mean, by my recollection, he only invited the police to his apartment weeks and weeks after Chandra disappeared. And then he negotiated over the time to make it late at night so it would be of the least embarrassment to him, right?
That's right. I mean, he's saying he gave up his right to not have them come in, which is true, but he only spoke to the police and admitted, we think, the affair after Chandra's aunt came forward. Remember that? So when he says he came forward and cooperated from the first day, it's just simply not true from the facts that we know as they are.
Geoffrey, I mean, even the most benign reading in that same paragraph where he says, I have cooperated and worked with law enforcement to find Chandra, I mean, we all know that, I mean, you know, at least according to all the reports we've gotten from our best sources, that he didn't admit to having an affair to Chandra Levy until the third interview, again, many weeks after she disappeared.
What I'm certain he was doing during this period of time, Linda, was making sure that he had a rock-solid alibi for that period of time that he didn't want to account for subsequent to his meeting with the vice president.
Okay, let me go forward to another paragraph a little bit later in this letter and run it by both of you. It says, I have not been silent with those in charge of finding Chandra. I have answered every single question asked by the police and FBI. At least we get back to the question of not only answering every single question. Well, sure, he's answered questions, but how fully did he answer them?
Right. Well, that's the legal technicality. Of course, he can say in those first two interviews, look, I answered all the questions they asked. They just didn't ask the question of whether I was having an affair with her or not. But that's a real legal technicality for him to come forward now and say I was cooperating, when to really have cooperated would have been in that first interview, exposed the fact that he was having an affair and talked to them about her state of mind, who she was seeing, what she was thinking about. You know, even if he had absolutely nothing to do with her disappearance, she would have told him things that she never would have told mom and dad, or aunt even. Okay,
Geoffrey, let me ask you about that same paragraph, the other sentence there. He says, I have not been silent with those in charge of finding Chandra. Nowhere does he mention anything about being in constant touch with Chandra Levy's parents. I mean, it's conspicuously absent.
He doesn't want to give his side of the story fully because he doesn't want to have those statements used against him subsequently. We're going to see tonight the same sort of vague statements that he's going to be making. There'll probably be an apology of some sorts, but I can assure you that from a defense standpoint, Abby Lowell's instructing him to be as vague as possible. Say a lot, but make it vague.
I understand that, but also if he did commit obstruction of justice, which, you know, the statements could be held against him, that's already happened. If he obstructed justice, he already did it. So what he says on television or in a letter doesn't really matter.
Well, I would argue from a defense standpoint, Linda, that in fact this is not a material fact. The United States Code makes this very clear as to what obstruction of justice is. You have to be obstructing a material fact involving the investigation. And Condit's going to argue that he hasn't done anything to impede the investigation of a material fact, Linda.
Okay, let me jump in with one other aspect of this letter, moving forward, where he says, some suggest that not talking with the media could mean I had something to do with Chandra's disappearance. I did not. I pray that she has not met the same fate as the other young women who have disappeared from the same neighborhood. At least it sounds to this reporter like he is trying to move the focus away from himself and onto something else that D.C. police have said is absolutely unconnected.
Absolutely, that's what he's trying to do, and maybe that is, you know, ultimately what the answer is. There have been other disappearances, and one does question why the D.C. cops didn't go out and, you know, talk to those registered sex offenders in her neighborhood. So I don't blame him for trying to move the ball on that one.
Geoffrey Nathan, your answer on that one?
I think that he's doing a good job of deflecting the attention away from himself, precisely the point, which is exactly what I would do if I was advising him. And it's a difficult person to advise because the spotlight is on him. The nation is waiting for his announcement this evening. We'll have to stand by and see whether or not he's able to pull it out.
Geoffrey Nathan, Lee Sewell, we thank you both. John?